Mr. Aslund, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I would like to start with Western sanctions against Russia. Have the sanctions against Russia achieved their strategic goals?
Yes and no. They have led to Russia's economy not having grown at all since 2014, but they are not breaking the Russian economy. They are just restricting the amount of money that Russia can spend on its military, and it's restricting the technology that Russia can import. These are the two main things that are being accomplished.
After the first day of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there have been lots of predictions that Western sanctions could cause an economic collapse of Russia. Why didn't it happen?
Because it never happens. Sanctions are not that effective. This was statements that were based more on wishful thinking than on serious analysis of sanctions. Normally, serious sanctions reduce the growth rate by 2 to 3% a year, and that's what we are seeing with regard to Russia.
Are you personally satisfied with the impact of Western sanctions on Russia's economy?
Of course, there's always more that can be done. I think that the financial sanctions are quite serious and effective, while the oil price cap sanctions are not sufficiently effective. And the Western countries are now undertaking various measures to try to make them more effective. For example, by sanctioning intermediaries that are delivering Russian oil in the grey fleet to the West.
How could you assess current condition of Russia's economy ahead of the 2024?
Well, Russia this year claims to get 2% growth, while it had a 2% decline last year. So this follows the line of stagnation that we have seen since 2014. And you can also note that in 2013, the average wage in dollar in Russia was $1,200. Today, it is less than $600 a month. So the dollar wage in Russia during one decade of war has halved. And you can also see that the exchange rate of the ruble has fallen from 32 rubles a dollar in 2013 to now around 100 ruble per dollar. So the ruble has lost 2/3 of its value, and Russia's reserves have been immobilized or become illiquid for various reasons. So Russia is now facing a tight budget constraint and can't really run a budget deficit. But even so, Russia can spend 10% of GDP on its military, which is a lot. The US spends 3.5% of its GDP on the military, and Europe slightly less than 2% of GDP.
Could Russian ruble lose its value even more in the next year?
It's quite possible. We are now seeing that the Central Bank of Russia has increased its interest rate to 15%, while inflation is about 7% in Russia now, which means that the real interest rate of 8% is extremely high, and it really blocks investment. So what is happening now is that Russia is living on the military-industrial complex, and we are seeing that unemployment is very low, 2.9% officially, while that means that people are being paid very little. So the Russian economy is looking ever more Soviet, which was full unemployment, low salaries, poor standard of living, and very poor quality of the output, particularly when concerned technology.
How has also mobilization influenced the state of Russia's economy and financial system?
Well, last year we saw an immigration of slightly more than 400,000 officially during the first half of the year. During the second half of the year, probably 1.1 million people. And so say 1.5 million people left Russia, mainly young, well-educated Russians in the 20s and 30s. The problem is that they have found it difficult to stay outside of Russia. So probably hundreds of thousands of them have returned home when the risk of mobilization seemed less. So mobilization destabilized the Russian economy. One of the big problems for the military-industrial complex is now a shortage of labor. The greatest problem is, of course, a shortage of sophisticated electronics. Strangely, Russians right now don't seem to be very preoccupied with a threat of a new mobilization, which would be natural after the so-called presidential election on the 17th of March.
Russia will double its defense spending in the next year. How could it influence Russia's economy?
Well, it means that Russia is spending ever less on its population, education and healthcare. This will probably be made possible by not giving full compensation for the inflation. So far, the Russian government insists on having a nearly balanced budget because Russia has almost no reserves, so it can't borrow abroad because of the Western sanctions, and it does not have any active liquid reserves of its own.
You mentioned about liquid reserves. How long would it be possible for Russia to stabilize its financial system while fighting the war in Ukraine? How could you assess current state of Russia's financial reserves?
Russia hardly have any financial reserves now, and if you live on your own tax revenues and don't have a budget deficit, you can continue for a very long time.
Also, Politico reports that about Russia's oil cap. It seems like it has failed because Russia's oil sells for more than $60 per barrel. In your opinion, is there a chance for the West to properly enforce an oil cap?
Yes. Last year we saw that the Western, very confused energy policy towards Russia led to very high gas prices. The gas prices have now come down in Europe. They are 90% below what they were in August last year. That's the level where they should be. And the oil price is of the world market is slightly over $70 per barrel, so it's not very high. And most of Russian oil comes from two Western seas, the Baltic Seas and the Black Sea. In both cases, there are choke points where the countries could demand to check the quality of the ships and their insurance. The Danes could do so in Öresund. The Finns and the Estonians could do so in the Gulf of Finland. And the Turks can do so in the Bosphorus. it's amazing that there has not been a catastrophe with one of these substandard oil tankers that Russia now utilizes in its grey fleet. So I would expect that we will see the Nordic countries tightening up the standards in the Baltic Sea, and the Turks doing so in the Black Sea. These are essential. These places take about 90% of all Russian oil exports by sea. So this is something that I think will come. And when they tighten up the environmental standards, one is that they demand proper international insurance that these Russian ships don't have. And therefore they should not be allowed to pass through. The Turks don't allow LNG shipping through the Bosphorus because they consider that the environmental risk is too great. The risk with the Russian Grey Fleet is far greater. So this is something that I think naturally will come. We can only hope that it will come relatively soon.
Also, Bloomberg reports that Russia's oil revenue even today is even greater than before the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In your opinion, would it be possible for the West to cause a dramatic drop in Russia's oil revenues?
Well, the Russian oil revenues are going up and down like a yo-yo with the oil price. If you compare with the Russian oil revenues at the beginning of COVID in 2020, then the revenues are higher. If you compare with the oil revenues last year, they are far lower. So this is just pretty responsible play with statistics. My assessment is that Russia will gain about $150 billion less from its export of oil and gas this year. That means that Russia will lose about 1/4 of its export revenue from last year.
In your opinion, what should be the West's next steps in order to limit Russia's ability to finance its war in Ukraine?
Well, as I've already said, to make sure that the Russian grey fleet, which is environmentally dangerous, is being stopped for environmental reasons in the Baltic Sea and in the Black Sea. And then we solve also the problem of Russia earning too much money.
President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is meeting with congressional leaders and President Biden. Would he be able to convince House and Senate Republicans to support aid for Ukraine?
It's very difficult to know. I think that it's great and heroic of President Zelenskyy that he has come to Washington now, really to make his case. This is truly brave, and if anything can change, it's his appearance here today. As it appears to me, it's all is dependent on one person, former President Trump, who loves Putin. I presume that is being paid by Putin, but that we are not being informed about because the FBI has never investigated Trump's financial operations with Russia, of which we know there has been very extensive ones. And Trump is now owning the Republican Party. So all elected Republicans are dead frightened of him, and dare not go against him in any way publicly. And Trump wants to stop all money to Ukraine. And therefore the Republicans are falling down and obeying him, seemingly not understanding what is going on. This is a tragedy that is being caused by the lacking financial transparency in the US. I can suspect that Trump is being paid by Putin, but I can neither prove nor disprove that that is the case, because there's so much dark money in the US economy, and it's perfectly illegal, and there's also hundreds of millions of dark money in US politics, and unfortunately that's perfectly legal.
In your opinion, Ukraine has been receiving financial assistance from the United States, the European Union, and other allies from the first day of the war, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Would it be possible for Ukrainian economy to survive without Western economic aid, at least without the economic aid from the United States?
It would be extremely difficult. Of course, that would be extreme austerity, and it would be very difficult to pursue the war meaningfully without the US financial support. President Biden and his administration understand this very well. The Democrats are fully united behind the Ukrainians, and half of the Republicans in Congress have claimed to be very supportive of Ukraine. But now they fall when President Trump is against it, because they dare not go against President Trump. I hope that we can see some change today, and it's all dependent on what courageous President Zelenskyy manages to do. But I can't say that I'm optimistic.
Recently, you tweeted that a vote for Trump is a vote for Putin. What is your prediction in case of Donald Trump's presidency in the terms of both economic and security assistance for Ukraine?
Well, it's quite obvious. Trump will stop all security assistance to Ukraine because he wants Putin to win.
Why does he want Putin to win, in your opinion?
That's what I just said. He has not made any case for it. He has never criticized Putin in one word. He has called him a genius when he started the war against Ukraine. And personally, I'm convinced that Trump is all about money, and that he gets money in various ways from the Kremlin. But the US allows so much financial secrecy that we have no ability to figure that out.
Let's cover also European policy. The European Council will meet this week to try to pass aid for Ukraine and to start accession negotiations with Ukraine. However, Viktor Orban says that he would block both aid for Ukraine and accession negotiations. In your opinion, is Orban just blackmailing the European Union, or is he just working on to disrupt the whole Western support for Ukraine?
I think it's he wants to disrupt all the support for Ukraine. And since January 2012, it appears as if Viktor Orban has been bought by Putin in connection with a big nuclear power investment in the nuclear power reactor PAX-2, which is being delivered by Rosatom and financed by Vneshe Ekonom Bank. So I think that Orban, like Trump, is just corrupted by Putin, and that he only cares about money. So therefore, I think the situation is much more difficult. President Zelenskyy now signed the law on minority rights, so that Orban's old argument about the Hungarian minority in Ukraine has disappeared. And now he claims that Ukraine is just too corrupt to become a member of the European Union, while he has personally made Hungary the most corrupt country in the European Union. Hungary is now ranked as more corrupt than Bulgaria and Romania, the previously most corrupt countries in the European Union that have improved their situation, while Orban has managed to make Hungary more corrupt. The tragedy is that the European Union has not managed to deprive Hungary of its vote in the European Council, which is possible according to Article 7. But Orban managed to escape that for a long time because he belonged to the European People's Party, which had the majority in the European Parliament, thanks to Fidesz. And they should have disciplined Orban long ago when he undermined democracy, rule of law, freedom of the media, and democracy in Hungary. Unfortunately, they did not. And now they don't seem to be able to know what to do. They're holding back money to Hungary, but Orban seems to be able to extract it from them. But then at least he should deliver what is necessary for Ukraine. But I fear that in one way or the other, he will continue to block Ukraine. This is just working for Putin. This is not in Hungary's interest. This is personal corruption.
Also, the European Union plans to impose sanctions on Russia's diamonds. How would it be harmful for Russia's economy?
Not very important. So, it would be better to sanction all Russian exports to the West and then make exemptions for what is truly necessary for the West, certain methods, for example, and just leave Russia outside of the Western economy.
As the war in Ukraine is moving into 2024, would it be more difficult for Ukraine to secure new economic, financial, and security assistance from the West?
Well, of course, if Ukraine loses the US this time, the money is not likely to come back. So what we are seeing now is a catastrophe in the making. And then I don't see how Ukraine could be financed. And if the EU fails to deliver, it's not equally catastrophic because each EU member is delivering substantial funds bilaterally, and each of the EU members could deliver even more than they do now. So the EU decision of financing is not that important. But to start the accession negotiations is very important. There is one big source, and that is the $300 billion of central bank, Russian central bank reserves that have been frozen in the West. This money should be confiscated and given to Ukraine. And there are the main forces against it is the European Central Bank, for no good reason, Germany and France, for no reason whatsoever, just that we don't do such things. So I think that if Ukraine now fails to get the money from the US, that Ukraine should completely focus on demanding confiscation and receipt of the Russian Central Bank reserves in the West, as compensation for all the damage Russia has caused Ukraine, as war reparations. This is perfectly illegal according to international law.
Thank you, Mr. Aslund, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. These are tough times for Ukraine, so I really hope that President Zelenskyy will have luck in Washington today. Thank you.
Thank you.